Welcome to the Balanced Badass Podcast, the show for multitaskers determined to stay balanced and badass without losing their minds. Every week, we help you manage your overflowing calendar and household, making sure you still have time to breathe, laugh, and savor that much-needed glass of wine at the end of the day. Think of this podcast as your weekly dose of practical advice, humor, and tough love, just like catching up with a friend who really gets it. I'm Tara Kermit, your personal growth coach, helping you handle how was your day without a meltdown. Now let's get into today's episode. All right, friends, welcome back to the Balanced Badass Podcast. I'm excited to be here with you all today. And I really just want to talk about really quick, what's really wild for most of us is that the thing that really stands between us, like with burnout and balance between those two things, is really most of the time boundaries. A lot of times there's other things, obviously, but boundaries tend to be a conversation that I have with a lot of folks. And yet setting them tends to feel like you're climbing up a mountain with like a backpack full of guilt, shame, people-pleasing tendencies. Or maybe that's me. I don't know. But I am just so excited because we've got Pam with us here today. And she is a trauma and eating disorders therapist who's all about empowering people to reclaim their mental health. And she's also a hardcore feminist, passionate about making real, meaningful change in how we approach burnout, how we approach boundaries, and women's health. So I'm personally very excited for this conversation, and I know many of you all are going to get a lot out of it. So I just want to jump right into it and just welcome Pam to the Balanced Badass Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited.
For the listeners, right before we hopped on and started recording, we were chatting about our fur kids and how both of us like to collect pets. And as my listeners know, my 5 dogs tend to make their presence known in some way, shape, or form, usually at least once during an episode. So just stay tuned for that in case that does happen, friends. So before we jump into the meat of our conversation, Pam, I did want to start with an icebreaker question that I ask all of my podcast guests because I just love this question. And that is, what is something that you're loving in your life right now?
Oof. 2025 is not off to a good start. So
Fair.
That's a tough one, right? Well, as you said earlier, we love our fur babies. And I really love mine. They bring me such joy. I'm really loving them, the comfort that they bring me during these really, really rough times.
Yes, I agree. Anytime I'm like having a really rough time, especially with like the political landscape going on and all that jazz, I like to grab really my old lady because she doesn't know anything else that is going on. And I just snuggle with her. And I feel like at least like my central nervous system kind of gets back to normal a little bit for a little while.
There's research to that. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I am here for it.
Yeah. So, well, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really like to start with that question because to your point, like it's very easy to get bogged down with all of the heavy stuff that's surrounding us, whether that's environmentally, within our context, within our personal lives, professional lives, whatever. And so I like to try to shift focus, even if it's just for a short little bit of time, to really think about what's going well in our lives. So I appreciate that. And I really just want to start off our conversation with your story. So what has been your personal experience with burnout? Maybe how has it shaped the way that you approach boundaries and mental health today, and thinking about kind of the line of work that you do as well?
I talk often about boundaries. I'm so passionate about them. And I often say that if you have quality boundaries now, it means that you had really awful ones. Because no one is born with these these amazing solid boundaries.
Right.
It's learned, right? And so I had awful ones. They were terrible, and especially in the field that I'm in. This is my second career. So going into this field, I say later in life, but I mean, I'm not that, I was in my 30s, but even still, it was shock to the system. I worked in inpatient, uh, people on Medicaid, so community mental health.
Mm,
How do I establish boundaries with people who needed it the most? It was really hard. I had to figure it out myself,
right.
but also personally too.
Mm-hmm.
I was really lucky in that when starting my own boundary work at work, it bled over into my
Mm,
personal life. Really, really lucky because I work with a lot of people in caring fields or helping fields where they're great at work and can't really
translate.
struggle in their personal life. You know, I think for most people, boundaries, again, it's learned.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a good system where you learn from, which I don't think many people do,
Yeah.
it sets this system. So I was going through life, friendships, relationships, jobs, my boundaries sucked. And I think also for women or assigned female at birth, we're told, and especially when you're young too, right out, if you go to college, then it's right out of college or right out of high school, you can't say no.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a big one. You have got to say yes. The boss says, ask to, got to say yes.
I know. It's ridiculous too because it's such a double standard because other folks, it's fine for them to say no, but they're expecting the yes.
It's almost respected.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Almost respected. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it just goes to show the varying standards that exist for a lot of things in our society.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think what interested me or what kind of sparked my brain when you were talking about just how the kind of bleeding over. So like
Mhm.
the professional boundaries for you really helped kind of lean into your personal boundaries. And that's something that I talk with folks too about is figuring out like what are the small little ways that you're doing something that's working in one pocket of your life that you can
Yeah.
translate that to another pocket of your life. Like for me, it was actually the opposite. So like I was really good at personal boundaries, at least with like maybe second to third degree folks. Like probably immediate family boundaries, a little different for me.
Those are the hardest ones.
Yeah.
Setting boundaries with family is the hardest one, I think, for the majority of people. But yeah, setting boundaries with like neighbors or
Mhm.
maybe acquaintances or people who are not super close.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
that another thing that I learned too, or that through reading and practicing and which I agree with you, like it's a learned skill. It's not something we're born with this boundary setting stuff.
Yeah.
And another thing that really helped me was reframing how I saw the boundary. And I talk about this a lot too, is that the boundary is not has not nothing to do with the other person or the other environment, but my boundary is about how I'm reacting to that.
Yes.
So, yes, they are involved and they're in the equation, but that helped me at least release some of that people pleasing, some of that guilt that I felt because I wasn't seeing this as me putting it on someone else. I was seeing it as me taking responsibility for
Right.
how I was going to respond.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point about the guilt. When people start talking about, and I include myself in that too, when, but the guilt I have, okay, sometimes that decreases and sometimes it doesn't. Do it anyway.
Well, and honestly, I think when you're experiencing that guilt, gives you an opportunity to explore that a little bit more to see where's that guilt kind of coming from? Where's the root of that guilt stemming from so that you can explore that, address it if you want to address it. Because there's
Right.
also folks that may say, okay, I feel guilty and I know where it's coming from and I'm just going to accept it and move on.
And who taught you that?
Yeah. Yeah, That's one thing that I talk a lot about is like, where do our convictions come from? Where do our values come from? And like, what are these things to you versus what have been fed into you?
A lot of it is external.
Oh, yeah.
I blame society for everything.
Well, sometimes it's pretty accurate. It
You
is.
know, I mean, not really, but a lot of it's is those societal expectations.
And kind of thinking about that too, like, especially with your work that you do with
Mm.
women as a feminist. And we
Oof,
know, and you brought up, like, women were so often conditioned to say yes, to be the one that takes care of others before we even think about who the heck we are and what we need,
gross.
to the point that we like can really damage our souls essentially and our spirit. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious from your perspective, like, how do you help your clients reframe that mindset so that they can prioritize their mental health, their well-being, and just reconnect with who they are?
Where do I start with that one? Because I have a million thoughts.
Let
As
them
you
all rip.
I'm a book nerd, and it wasn't on purpose that I set up here. It's just the best light,
I
right?
love it.
Um, I implement a lot of research into any conversation I have. I'm a big research person, and that includes the books that I read too.
Mhm.
Nonfiction is my my jam. Um, so the one part that you asked me about was, implementing how this conditioning affects us, right? There's now research about all of that anger and trauma and repressing all of this and what that does to our physical health, and that's why women or assigned female at birth have more autoimmune diseases than men, right? Or more than ever.
Mm.
There's research behind that. And so I like to kind of go that way of like, here are some studies, here's some research. Think about that, right? Because I think mental health stigma is still alive and well,
Mhm.
but when we focus on the physical health, that scares people I think more than anything else. So I kind of
Yeah.
go with that first. What was the other question?
Well, it's just like, how do you help your clients reframe their mindset
Mm.
to be able to prioritize themselves and their mental health and overall well-being?
I talk about where they fall on the list.
Mm.
Where are they at on their list? Do they even make the list?
Hmm.
Are they even on it?
That's heavy because I would imagine, just from a total guess, that if you were to do that as an activity, like let's say we put a bunch of
I
women in
have
the room or female, like,
today. It
and
is
yeah,
tears, tears,
yeah.
anger, frustration. Absolutely. Yeah, so many people, and especially for parents, and this goes for the dudes too,
Mhm.
but yeah, seeing where they fall, and sometimes not the other people who are on it are these inconsequent like, who's that? Who what? Why is your boss on there?
Mm.
Why like, before you? Why are all these other people before you? And the age-old analogy, you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you help other. Like, that's a real thing. And yet, here you are going through life. Oh, I have to put these 20 people on, and maybe I make the like, we have a legal pad and you're not even on? Are you kidding me? The fuck out of here.
I wonder too how many folks would even put like non-people things, like work
Oh,
or,
right.
like
Well,
a hobby or
I like to do people because
yeah,
then they can really see it. Could you imagine if I
like
put other pff,
mhm.
get out of here. That makes me wanna pass out.
But I think very necessary because
Mhm.
we're not aware of what we're not aware. So if we're just coasting through life,
Mhm.
naturally not even thinking about ourselves, naturally putting ourselves at the bottom of the list or off the list or
Not even
on someone else's list, who knows?
if you're
Then if you're like right, then, like, the damage that that's doing as
Mhm.
it builds
Yeah.
before you even come to the realization. So I love that that's, like, something intentionally that you do because
Mhm.
you've gotta have awareness to it before before you can address the dang thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really it's really upsetting doing that kind of activity, to think like, "Wait a second, I don't even fit in.
Mhm.
I don't even make my own life. What?" That's
Yeah.
depressing.
That is very depressing, and it makes sense why many of us are in therapy.
You know? Yeah.
Or why most of us need therapy even if you're not in therapy. Well, let's talk a little bit about kind of some of the work you do with folks going through, like, very tough experiences. Everybody has something challenging that they have to go through, and so I'm really hoping that you can inspire us in some way, but thinking about, like, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to someone who just feels like they're completely drained, they have reached their limit, they're at their breaking
Capacity.
point.
Talk about capacity a lot.
Yeah, and, like, how do they even start to rebuild? How do they start to
Hmm.
climb their way out of the pit, if you will?
Ooh, the imagery is important there.
Mhm.
I ask about self-care a lot, and I think self-care has become this, like, wellness trend, and that is not where it originally stemmed from, yeah, like, and it's cute if you're into bubble baths or getting your nails done or whatever,
Sure.
'cause that you're taking time, and that's great, but what would it look like to take 10 minutes out of your day to really sit? What does self first so defining what self-care looks like. What's gonna work here? What's your idea of self-care? What does that look like for you? What
Mhm,
does taking care of yourself look like? 10
mhm.
minutes, all I'm asking. If you go more than that, awesome. Don't have to. Start at the
Right.
bare minimum.
That's what I always say too, like, with habit building. I
Yeah.
always use the example. Let's say you wanna go to the gym, your first goal should just be driving to the gym and getting to the parking lot, maybe going in for 5 minutes. Build up on that. So, like, the 10-minute self-care,
Yeah.
build up on that. Like, it doesn't have to be this huge, overwhelming thing. Because I think the issue with self-care too, and you bring up a good point about it being, like, this trendy thing now,
Mhm.
is that we haven't taken the time to really think about what do we need right now? What do we need in different seasons of our life and different moments of our life, like, throughout the day, my self-care looks very different from what I need in the morning to night depending on what I've experienced.
Sure. Right.
So we need, like, a menu of options too to be able
Yeah,
to
and
choose
so
from.
that's another thing that I also suggest. We have our phones with us at all times.
Mhm,
Keep a list in your phone because in those moments where you're like, I have the time, I wanna do something, what works for me? The one that so you have that list, "Okay, maybe this one no, okay," and you go through. "This one is doable, I have the time for this, I wanna spend this time, and this seems okay."
so here's a question for you, kinda
Mhm.
maybe exploring that list a little bit more too.
Sure.
When folks realize they're not on the list or at the bottom,
Mhm.
how do you help them through that processing of that, but also to slowly inch their way up on the list? Like, what are some strategies that may be helpful for folks that may wanna do this on their own too?
That's such a tough one because it really depends on who's getting in the way.
Mm,
I'm a big fan of saying no. People are fearful of saying no.
It's my
What's
favorite
the
word.
right? Oh
Well,
my
one of them. I have plenty.
god. Yeah. They are 4 letters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't it scares people, and so I think that's something to look into and talk about and where that comes from. So looking more into that and what the fear is, because it's oftentimes it's the work related stuff that I think can be okay. Let's push this to the side, right? Um, or practicing starting to say no maybe with others.
Mhm.
So what does that look like? What is it? What's and starting small. It's like, okay, if this something bothers you, or what would it look like to have a little bit of a conversation? I get this a lot of, I hate confrontation, which that hurts my whole heart because I love confrontation. It's like my favorite thing, but it's also just a different way of communicating. So
Mhm.
then you're basically saying, I don't like communication. That doesn't make sense to me. Like, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you, because I think confrontation, it's this idea of like you're screaming at each other, and that's not it.
Mm-mm.
It's assertive communication. So starting to do these simple, well, I know they're not simple, but it gets to be simple. And then that way you can start to maybe, okay, does this person really need to be in front of me?
I remember very much the first time I said no to, like, a social engagement. That was my first, like, really practice round of saying no because 'cause I'm very much an introverted personality. So, like, when I take the Myers-Briggs, like, it's supposed to be a spectrum. I am not. I'm 100% introverted
Yeah,
every time I have
great.
taken it.
Mhm. But I think the first one is interesting, the introversion, extroversion. That's
Yeah,
the one I can get down with. Sure.
yeah. So, I do prefer one-on-one time, that kinda stuff, like
Oh,
in-depth
so this is your jam right
relationships.
here.
Oh, yeah, girl. Like,
Oh my god, yeah.
don't ask me to go to a networking event because I want to vomit.
Dream, dream scenario, completely extroverted.
Good for you. We need
But
people like you.
here's the thing, I didn't realize that until, like, 2 years ago.
Oh,
I thought I was
well,
like an introverted extrovert or extroverted intro no, duh. Anyway, so much for self-awareness,
yeah,
but
well, we're always learning and growing, aren't we?
yeah, isn't that the truth? But
Yeah. But that was the first time. So I would always say yes to everything, even though
mhm,
I dreaded going or
yeah.
knew that it was gonna drain me, and I very much remember the first time I said no, like, I was sweating, I
Oh,
had
right.
such a physical response to it,
Like,
but
grow
I
up.
also very much remember afterwards, like, the feeling of just rightness, I guess, like, I just felt like I made the right decision.
Right, for you.
Right,
Absolutely.
and that is what I remember every time I do it now, is like, how am I
Without
gonna
saying
feel?
sorry,
Oh, yeah,
without
no.
explaining yourself.
Never over explain. That's the one thing I always push, like, nobody
Yes,
needs to know why you're saying no.
absolutely.
You can give them a courtesy little, like,
Mhm.
"No, I'm good," or "I'm at capacity," and that's all you have to say. You do not have to say what you have going on. They don't need to
Right,
know your business.
absolutely. I think what's hard for me being extroverted is that I have some physical ailments. Um, so it's like I really wanna go, but I have to see how I'm feeling.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes it could be last minute and the
Mhm.
chronic illness and the chronic pain that goes on, I'm down for the count. And
Yeah.
it sucks. I don't wanna be a bailer because I know I don't like when that happens to me. But
But
now
I
you
also
know,
but
but
I
and
think,
some
like,
people don't get it. Keep going,
yeah,
sorry.
sorry. Well, I was just gonna say, like, some people don't get it, but the right people will understand
Thank you.
and
Yeah,
know that you're taking care of yourself
right. Yeah.
how you need
It's
to.
it's an interesting it's an I interesting situation that goes on, and I talk a lot about that with people who are like, are now dealing with chronic illness or chronic pain where it's like, can't do it or I can't make the thing or it's like I understand, but now the shoe's on the other foot and it's me. Um, so being extroverted or having extroverted friends, it's like, no, even though I want to.
Mhm.
It's new territory for me. Um, and some people don't get it, and they'll give me shit. I'm just like, "Ew, excuse you." Yeah.
Well, I know I wanna respect our time, and I still have one more question for you
Yeah.
that I am excited to hear your perspective on. So as you know, this
Yes.
podcast is the Balanced Badass Podcast. So we are all about balanced living with badass results around here.
Mhm.
So I'm curious from your perspective, how do you define being a balanced badass in your own life?
Oh, I'm very lucky in that I have a really solid work-life balance. Um, and again, like saying no to stuff, but when I want to, not
Mhm.
because of, struggling or anything like that, but and also taking the time for me. Um, Work is challenging, and I now work from home. So it's not like I have the commute and then am able
The
to
separation.
Yeah, so what's been different is like I close the laptop and I'm done.
Mhm.
So that's been helpful. Also, we live in such a hustle culture. No. Rest is productive and I
Mm-mm.
need it. I need that. And I won't apologize for it. I've been doing that since my 20s. If I have a day, I called
Mhm.
it, I used to call it a day off from life. Did nothing. And I love that. I don't know why more people don't do it.
I know. I love my favorite days are my couch rotting days where I just sit on the couch and
Yeah.
the literally, I may be watching the same TV show I've seen 100,000 times,
Yeah. No,
but
it's
it's
great.
just so I can kinda, like, zone out and
Absolutely. It's like, okay,
recharge.
yeah, I have chores to do, I have stuff to do, but I have a list and I'll get that done and I'm not gonna stress about it. I'm not gonna worry about it because the thing is, there will always be things to do, but I know what I need to do for me.
Mhm,
So I'm at the top of that list
mhm,
and that's not gonna change.
and I love that. The unapologetic nature of that is so empowering for your internal self, but I think for anyone else that knows you, sees
Absolutely.
that, and,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
absolutely that speaks to them too, so awesome.
for sure.
Love it. Well, Pam, thank you so much for bringing just your whole authentic self to the
I
conversation.
can't be any other way, truly.
That's the best way to be. So,
Yeah,
I
thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
yes, I really do appreciate it, especially because the conversation around boundaries, it can feel like it's just a
Yeah.
hot mess of a thing to do, but
And it's very trendy right now too, and so people are like, "Well, okay, well, I know I need to work on boundaries. How do I
yeah,
do that? What now?
sure,
What's
sure.
my first step? What do you mean?"
Right.
Yeah,
So, I think even just like the list is a great kind of action step that someone can take just to start the ball rolling on setting their own boundaries and thinking about what do they need and where do they fall in their life, if they
yeah,
even fall in their life, like you said.
right. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a big one.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, folks that are listening, I really do want you to think about maybe one boundary that you've been avoiding, maybe
Ooh,
one no that you haven't wanted to say, and just think about what it would feel like to say no or to set that boundary and what it could open up for you. Because I think something that Pam kind of showed us too is that by saying no, you are opening up your heart to something else. You're giving an opportunity for something that better serves you in the long run. So just keep that in mind. And Pam, if folks wanted to connect with you to learn a little bit more about your work, just get in touch with you. Where can they find more information to stay in touch?
I am on Instagram. I rarely post on it, but I do post a lot of stories that are helpful,
Okay.
um, for trauma and disordered eating and boundary stuff and that kind of thing. I will eventually keep up with it, but until so it's Pam Rothman, LPC.
Cool. Cool. And I'll add that link to the show notes. And just as a reminder, folks, be sure to like, share this episode, send us a DM, subscribe to the podcast, everything that you can do to help spread the word about the Balanced Badass podcast, but also to just share these gems to your network and your circle. And I hope that you'll take care of yourself. And just remember that balance doesn't happen by accident, friends. You have to put yourself first. You have to put yourself on the list. So it's something that you need to intentionally work on every single day. I'll see y'all back here soon. Thanks for hanging out with me on the Balanced Badass podcast. I hope today's episode brought you a little more balance and a lot more badass in your day. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave a review. Your support helps more multitaskers like you find the show, and I'd really appreciate it. Until next time, take care of yourself and make good choices, friend. I'll catch you next week.